and welcome to Our People, the podcast where we give space for Holdeman stories. We focus on hope, healing, and inspiration. Connection, consciousness, and love are the driving motivations for this project. Remember to have grace for those who have chosen to speak out and share their experience. Please enjoy the story you will hear today.
Welcome to Our People's podcast. Tonight, I am your host, Amanda, and with me, I have Sylvia Baize. She's a mother and an author and a speaker, and she is just going to share some part of her story tonight. So, Sylvia, I'll let you have it.
Okay, hi. I am so excited to be on here and talk to you about my life that God has given me. I'm often in awe at the plan God gives to our lives. It's just so perfect with all the mess ups we do and everything. But when we look back at how beautifully He creates us and our lives, I'm just in awe. So I grew up in Brazil, and I love that part of my life. I had a beautiful childhood. There were definitely things about my childhood that I look back on with a little sadness, but I'm the kind of person that I seize the moment and I live in the moment, and I love my childhood in Brazil. And I love Brazil so much. And when I was 17, I met my husband, Patrick Baize, at a wedding in California, and we connected. And then 2 years later, we met again, and then that summer we got married. And so that was really, really hard part for me to let go of Brazil and know that I wouldn't live there anymore. Um, so that kind of tells you how much I loved where I lived. But we got married in '96, and we had three children close together. And we lived in South Dakota during that time. And when we moved from South Dakota to California, shortly after that, we decided to pursue adopting. I grew up with adopted siblings, and so adopting was just part of the way you made a family. And because I had heard that you needed to ask the staff whether you should adopt or not, and we wanted to be the good Mennonite citizens that we were supposed to be, we invited one of the ministers over and told him what our plans were. And he was all excited, and we walked away from that meeting, and he called us back the next day and says, I've been thinking about it, and there was just negative. And so we knew that we were going to be in for a ride, because the conviction was strong and clear that we would be adopting. For me, especially, and then that kind of is one thing that got me in trouble with the staff, was that I was stronger on my part than on Pat's part. But the thing is that Pat was just trying to work through all of that stuff. He wasn't against me or what I was wanting. He was just trying to work through it all, which is what every family does, every couple does. But that suddenly became a bad mark on us. And so through it all, they also found out that I had my tubes tied, so I no longer could have children of my own, and that caused me some problems because I was too young to do that. And so that was kind of where the whole problem started. And so anyways, we went through 5 years of staff visits and trying to figure out why we were adopting, and we would be asked to have everything put on hold, and then they would take it off hold. And then anyways, it was a long wait anyways with the adoption side of it. And that was all in God's plan, because He was waiting to give us the very most perfect child for us. But but it didn't help to have all the harassing going on and the lack of support. But that being said, I will say that almost every one of those staff members came back and apologized later for what they had done to us. So I do want to clear their name on that part. But we adopted a son with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, so he was very much special needs. But during that time of questioning and wondering why we weren't being supported, instead we were being harassed, that took me and Pat into a search for what is truth. And that began our journey of reading our Bible and just delving into what God says about everything. And we actually started thinking about finding another church at that point. But we never quite had the courage to go that far. And it wasn't God's timing. God had a different plan. And I believe that was it was the Holy Spirit leading us not to do that at that point. It would have been a very much more difficult situation for us if we had gone out at that point. So we moved to we moved to Arizona from there. And in Arizona, it was just a starting up congregation in Prescott. And we only had the preacher and his wife here. And
What year did you move to Arizona?
2010. Yeah. And so they were supportive. And when we adopted again, they threw us a party. So there was a total difference. They were just amazing. And they let us grow. And they were never on our shoulder saying you're doing something wrong, saying, can you change this? Can you change that? We were so imperfect. Our child training was in a wreck at that point because we had been through so much, and we were so tired of being under the microscope that we just messed up with our kids during that time. And so when we came here, we were able to relax and find out who we really were and not train our children because of what others thought, but because of what God wanted us to do. So that changed that part. So we were enjoying ourselves here in Prescott. More families moved in, and it was a very free situation where we could just be ourselves. We were enjoying that. And then there was the letter situation. We weren't part of the 40-man letter that went out, but when we found out about it, we supported it. And so we started finding out there were others in the congregation that felt the same as we did. And we started reaching out to others and finding out who was seeking truth. And we found that there was especially this one couple that was in trouble because they believed, they were part of the letter. And so we said, okay, well, we support you. And so there was about 4 or 5 families here that were expelled or left around the same time because we couldn't agree with what was being said when the revival ministers came and started saying, okay, this is it. So what happened when we left, when we decided that we could no longer be part of living untruth, if you want to put it that way, we had to work through all the curses that had been put on us. Your children aren't going to make it. Your marriage is going to suffer. There's so many things that we get told that it's not going to work. But I knew who I was grounded in. I knew I was grounded in Christ. And I knew that he was the one who I was going to follow. Both Pat and I. But I'm going to tell you my perspective. And that doesn't mean that Pat wasn't with me. He might have been just a little bit behind me in all of this. But I found out that submission did not mean that I had to do exactly what Pat did. And he never was the mean, you've got to listen to me, I'm your husband kind of person. And so I felt the freedom to be able to do that. But I found out that unless I went against his word exactly, where he specially asked me not to do something, that I was free to live my life in the way I felt God was leading me. And I didn't have to have him tell me that that's what God was leading me to do. It was so freeing and so redemptive. It was like, wow, I am no longer dependent on him for my happiness and for my every last word. I can live freely, respecting him and respecting his choices, and asking him if I need to know how he feels about something, but not in this fear that I'm going to be looking like I'm not submissive. I mean, so much of what I did in the past was filled with fear, like fear of what it looks like, instead of realizing that always there was this fear of doing things that might make me look like I'm not submissive. And I wanted to look like the submissive wife. And so much of my motivation was not right in the past. And so I was learning to live without fear and live out of love for Jesus. And it totally changed my perspective. And it freed up things in our marriage too. And so, we had so many decisions to face. What would we do with our children? How would we educate them? Leaving was hard. We went through a mourning period, and I believe most people that leave will find that they go through a mourning period. And the sooner you realize that's what you're doing, the easier it is, because otherwise you want to beat yourself up and say, what's wrong with me? And there's nothing wrong with you. It's okay to be sad that you're going to be rejected. It's okay to cry about that. But there was a point that we got to where we knew there was no going back, but going forward looked really hard, because you're letting go of all the things that you knew. And that sadness it's deep. It's like losing a loved one. And so that took so much reading our Bibles and finding truth. And then at one point, the discussion came up, well, is it God's will that we leave? Did God tell you to leave? And finally, it came to us that it's not about God telling you to leave. It's about following Jesus. And when you follow Jesus, you're going to be led away from untruth. It's that simple. It's not complicated, but the devil tried to complicate it in our minds. He tried to make it sound like, well, did God tell you to leave? If he didn't tell you to leave, you need this magical moment where you find out. And it's like, no, that was not how it worked. There has to be a quietness and know that you are following Jesus. That's what you need to know. That's the most important thing. And once you know that you are following truth, you're following Jesus, then the verses that leaving father and mother and brother and sister became real to me. I had no idea what those verses meant before. I had no idea how that worked in a person's life, but it became so real that I had to let go of their approval before I could be fully, truly invested in Jesus. And I had to be willing to suffer for that. And then once I grasped that truth, I could find joy in that. Even though it was sad to leave them, I could find joy in the, just like Paul said, that how did he say it about suffering? That he rejoiced in his suffering because it was for Jesus. And so another thing that really helped make up our minds, and this was for me, I'm telling you how I worked through my journey, was at one point I was reading in my Bible, and it was talking about the disciples they were arguing about who was the greatest and who was going to sit on the right hand of God. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, that's exactly what all these churches are doing. They are saying, I'm the better church. I get to sit on the right hand of God. I'm the only one true church. And we did discover that in Pat's studying, he found out that Jehovah Witness, Seventh-day Adventist, Mennonites, Holdeman Mennonites, and there was a couple others, were all founded during the same time in the 1800s with the same message. We are the one true church. We are the ones, come to us. We've got it all. And so that just opened up our minds so much to the falsehood in believing that and the pride in that. And I felt like God asked me to repent of that pride. We had a restaurant in Chino Valley, and in that time of having that restaurant, we enjoyed so much serving the community, and we got to have really good friends. We found other Christians, but during that time we were still Mennonite. And so what it bothered me and Pat the most was that people would come in, other Christians would come in, and there was a certain point we would get to in our conversation about spiritual things, about Jesus. And then Pat and I would back off. We would be like, okay, we can't go that far because we have a little bit more truth than what they do. And so we can't go along with what they're saying. And we can't see the beauty of their spirit because we're so busy seeing how good we are over here. And so that was one thing that God asked me to repent of, was that pride that kept me from communing with other Christians around me. And that took me on a whole nother journey. I remember so well standing in my kitchen. I know everybody's journey is different. I would never put this on someone else, but God surprised me that day. I was leaning against my kitchen table, and we had already left, and I was wearing skirt and blouse everywhere. And all of a sudden, God says, you need to start wearing pants. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you are fellowshipping with Christians now that wear pants. The women wear pants. And obviously in the Bible, men wear robes and women wear robes. There was a difference. The spirit of it was different. You knew who was a man, you knew who was a woman. And so the spirit is different in the woman. And I realized that I had some customers come into my restaurant, and they were this gal looked like a man because she wanted to look like a man. She purposed in her heart to look like a man so she could be the person that was the domineering one in the relationship. And so my neighbor wore her husband's clothes all the time, and she looks very feminine. She never looked like a man in his clothes. And so God just showed me the difference, the spirit behind what they were doing. And that was what he was talking about in the Bible about wearing men's clothing. And that verse that we had pounded into our heads for so many years. And I realized, okay, so what you're saying is I need to blend in with the other Christians and trust that I have been leading them and that I'm going to lead you in this. You can still look feminine in pants. And so I said, okay, we'll venture into that area of my life now. So it was exciting. It was scary, very, very scary. I think that most of us will say that part is very scary for a woman. It is more scary for a woman to leave than for a man, I believe. I don't know if that's completely true, but I believe mostly true. For a man, they don't have to change how they look to blend in, to fit in, to find a community. But for me to truly, truly be part of my community that I was discovering, I had to let go of those protections, those things that I was told were a protection from the world for me, and find my protection in Jesus. And I found such joy in doing and obeying in that small little thing. And I would never put it on someone else that they would have to wear pants for a woman, that they had to wear pants. But what I'm saying is, when God speaks and says, I want you to venture out here and I want you to let go of that falsehood in your life, that it's so important to do that. And so another thing that we were told was that our children would not survive if we left. I had teenagers. I had 3 teenagers. My one son actually had just moved out of to another congregation, and so he was really not part of our journey. But my other 2 teenagers were, and then I had my son who was that I had adopted, and my son Alex, he had some really good friends. This congregation here in Chino had been really kind to him, had loved on him, had given him such a fun childhood. He leaving those friends behind was like ripping his heart out. So as a mother, I was going through so much stuff myself. I was going through so much emotional detoxing, spiritual detox. It was horrible in a sense. I mean, there was the joy of the Lord, of course, but I was just so busy trying to keep my own self afloat. And then I had to help my child through his depression. He went through a mourning period too. My children did. My older ones could kind of take care of themselves, but my younger ones they had to have help getting through that tough time. But the happy ending to my story is that my children found a community that loves them, that they are free to follow Jesus in, that pray with them. The first time at church that my children, I have a photo of it actually, of my children talking to their friends, and they were sharing a struggle. And those friends just reached out, put their arms around them and said, let's pray about it right now. Right there in the parking lot, they prayed together. And I want to say that that is one of the most beautiful sights. It's one of the most beautiful things I've experienced after leaving, is that willingness to pray with each other right now, or on the phone, wherever. We pray. We go to Jesus immediately. We don't go to a staff member. We don't go to someone else to gossip. The lack of gossip in our community is so amazing, because I just read a quote recently about people that gossip are always going to be shallow Christians, because their focus is on the wrong place. And it's like, wow, that is so true. There was so much, a lot of times, innocent gossip. I'm going to pray for them kind of gossip, but it was hurtful. And I remember so well, my son was going to Bible study, and one of his friends at Bible study had gone through some trauma. I don't even know exactly what happened because I was never told, because we don't gossip. But what happened that evening was, they said he is not here tonight because something traumatic has happened in their home. And we are going to pray for them right now. And we want you to know that talking about it between yourselves and at school is not okay. Right here, right now, we're going to pray. And we took 15 minutes to go around the room and pray for this family instead of gossip about them, and try to give everybody the right details and the right story. It was about, it's none of your business what the story is. Your business is to pray for them. And I was just overwhelmed with the beauty of that. And I just wanted to take that moment and just put it in front of my Mennonite family, my Mennonite friends, and just say, look how God's family works. It is so beautiful. There is nothing carnal about this. This is about living in the Spirit all the way. And so, going on to my older children, I have a daughter who isn't married yet, but my son just got married last fall. And I tell you, he married the most wonderful Christian girl. Her parents are Christians. We get along wonderfully. We connect with them on a Jesus level, not on a whose relative you are level, and who do you know and who's your grandma level. It's the level of we worship the same Jesus. And I just find that so powerful, so beautiful. And I am so thankful that God led us to this life. I would never, ever put my children back in a situation like that again, where they were not free to live Jesus fully in their life. And there are other situations that have happened in our lives. I was trying to remember one of them, but I have had so many beautiful experiences with my friends, where they just come and they pray over me, they pray with me. When we first left, I was so full of emotional baggage. I felt like I just had these buckets of tears that wanted to come out all the time. If someone said, I'm going to pray for you, I just wanted to just start crying and crying and crying. And I just would be so embarrassed and I just didn't like it. I finally asked God to free me of that because it was almost like something that I used as a coping mechanism growing up. It was something I fell into because those strong emotions and all that we couldn't let out in front of people, it was somehow something that I thought was a virtue. I don't know. I still haven't figured it all out completely. And I know there was a lot of detoxing to do from the past, but I know that God has freed me of that. I can pray with others now without becoming emotional and starting crying. Not that I don't shed a tear now and then, but I don't get choked up like I'm just going to die of tears that are flooding me. I'm not going to drown in them. And I just am so thankful that I've healed this much. And I was at a women's retreat soon after we had left, and I realized how broken I was and how messed up I was yet. And at that moment, while a speaker, it was a woman's telling her story about trauma in her life and how God had helped her through all that. And I knew God just put this burning thing in my heart that I would someday be a speaker like that and I would help other women because of my trauma. And it was almost laughable. I was like, okay, I am so broken. And you come and tell me this in this state of brokenness that I know that's what I want to do, but I have absolutely no tools and no capability of doing it at this point. So I knew a lot of healing had to happen. And so that began the process of 5 years of healing. 5 years later now, God finally, and I had this agreement with God that when the time is right, I hear what you say I need to do. We both know that I'm not ready, but when you feel I'm ready and the time is right and I'm healed enough, you're going to tell me. And he was faithful. And just a few weeks ago, he came to me and said, the time is right now. You are going to pursue this. And so we've just been through some real deep financial trouble. And he again caught me in a time of deep searching and just a time of feeling like we don't have it all together, right? So he doesn't wait till you have it all together to ask you to do what he wants you to do. He waits and asks you when you are the most ready to receive it. And so when he asked me to go ahead with this, and then I start searching for speaking classes that would help me with this, because as we all know, we only go to the 8th grade unless demanded to otherwise, unless the state asks you to do otherwise. So 8th grade is my extent of my education. Women don't speak in public. And so I will say the only times I had a chance to speak in public were during council meetings. And I will tell you that I am the oddball out. I loved doing that. I got I got myself all geared up. It was my turn to talk about Jesus up there. And I remember so well getting so tired of hearing the everlasting, I'm just not having victory. I listen to country music again. Oh, I have pride with combing my hair over my ears. I'm going to quit doing that now. And I got so tired of that. And I said, you know what? When I get up there, I'm going to give them some Jesus, and I'm going to tell them how good he's been to me all year. And I loved it. I loved that platform. And I loved looking around and seeing people moved, like they heard Jesus through my voice. And so I knew that I needed more training. Um, I knew that I had it in me to speak, and that I have the gift to tell stories and to expound on what's in my heart, but that I needed training because it's such a new world to me. It's so foreign. I didn't grow up in it. I didn't go to college. I mean, I have done nothing but stay at home and take care of my kids and run a restaurant for a few years. Otherwise, it's me and my little family. And so I just know that in my heart, I have the right spirit, but I got to have some help with that. So, anyways, I found a wonderful trainer. I'm going through training right now, and I expect to be going out and speaking to women and maybe even families who have adopted. I'm not sure what my whole audience will be yet, where God will lead with all that, but that's where the direction's going. So, I am so thrilled. I feel so fulfilled. For years, I begged God, what can I do for others? Yes, I'm taking care of children. I know that's worthy and that's honorable. I like that. But you get a little bit stale sometimes when that's all you do. You gotta branch out and do more. And so I've been asking God for a few years now, what can I do? What is my place in this world? So writing a book was actually very fulfilling, and that was part of how I could reach out to others to share my story of how God had led us. And I wrote my book. It was meant to be, and I just wanted to bless other families, bless other people going through struggles, going through hard times. But then I didn't really promote my book because I self-published. So my book's kind of just been sitting there on Amazon. I give away books, but I haven't sold very many. And so that was all part of my prayer too. God, help me promote my book when the time is right. I know that I wrote it at the right time and published it at the right time when God led, but there had to be, I knew God had a specific way and time that he was going to have me start promoting my book and get it out there and get it in people's hands. And I have one more goal. I haven't shared with very many people, but I have one more goal, that my book will become a movie someday. So I am praying about that now. So I am so excited because I know that at some point that's going to come true. And I even have my producer that I want. I just haven't figured out a way to get a hold of him. So I don't know if any of you have watched The Chosen, but Dallas Jenkins is high up there on my list. I respect him very much. And I want him because I know through him it will be truthful, it will be accurate. There won't be a lot of Hollywooding done to it. And so that is one of my goals, one of my dreams. And for a little old Holdeman Mennonite girl, I think that's pretty high. But I am looking forward to whatever God has for our lives, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, that is so awesome, and I loved that. And yes, I have your book. It was meant to be. I ordered it off Amazon, like you said you can get it. That's the only place you said was available. And I enjoyed it so much. I actually read it in one day. I was sick, so I had the day to sit and read. I read it in one day, and I loved it. You talked about your childhood, you talked about your family, and all of the foster children they took in. And I just really, really, really enjoyed it. Of course, it helped probably that I am related to your husband's family. And so I got to see some or no, it was fun to get to know y'all's story that way and stuff. And I can't say enough about this book. I I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely looking forward to you said you had 3 more, right? That you wanted to write. Because
Oh
I know
boy,
that
that's a secret you just let out of the bag. I hope so.
okay, this ended with you. So you adopted your son and then your 2 daughters. And I know that since then you've adopted another little boy. And I cannot wait to read that story.
Yes, that's a story in progress being made right now. So I haven't written it yet. I think I started it a few years back, but I feel like I need a little more life to happen before I have a full story to write. But that it'll come yet. But I would like to work on a devotional type of book and then a children's book.
Yes.
So
Beautiful.
right now I'm focusing on my speaking though. I can't focus on all of that right now, but I do intend to write more in the future.
When the time is right, it'll come.
Yes.
I always believe in that.
Yes,
So
I do
okay,
too.
that is fantastic. Let me think. I was actually a little bit surprised and shocked to read in your book that that the staff had an issue with you adopting. Was it the fact that you were adopting, period, or that you adopted a special needs child?
They didn't know I was going to adopt a special needs child. They told me at one point that I had to call them and ask them for each child that I got a call on. And they had to approve that child before they would agree. And
I'm
so we didn't do that. We couldn't do that. But when we did come out with a child with special needs on top of all the negative we'd already been, the negative that we'd received from them, that was just the next blow. We were basically told we couldn't go to communion, and we were in the doghouse for real then.
I get okay, but I guess
But
I'm curious, what sin did they feel like you had committed?
well, I will say that, like I said, because of the scrutiny on us, our child training was a little bit off at that point. So, but I think that real simply said, what happened was this one preacher had a vendetta against us for personal reasons. And so I don't want to go into that because this isn't about running them in the
I
mud.
completely
But
understand.
let's just leave it at that. There was a vendetta.
Okay.
And like I said, there's been apologies made. And what happened was instigated by one person and the others followed.
Yes, yes. Okay. I completely understand. I have seen that a few times in different situations, obviously not adoption and stuff like that, but I have seen how that has played out, and and yeah, so I totally understand. Okay. Well, that is amazing. And then I think you mentioned a little bit that your children, then how many of your grown children were in the church that also left?
So I had my 3 older ones, my 3 biological children. So my oldest son had moved out, and so he didn't follow us, but my other 2 did. My oldest daughter and then my next son.
Okay.
And then my other children were younger, so they've obviously been with us.
Right.
It wasn't a choice for them. They're with us. So
Right,
yeah.
of course. Okay, very good. And yeah, I do see your daughter on Facebook and stuff like that, and she seems to have a very beautiful walk with God. I've been very inspired by her things, her posts.
Yes, she has amazed us so much. We are so proud of her. She was one of these Christians, these Holdeman Mennonite Christians that lived in doubts and fears. The amount of times that she came to me and was crying because she wasn't sure if she was saved. She wasn't sure how, and then she had a besetting sin and there was no way to overcome it. There was no possible way. And she tried and she prayed, and can you pray for me? But I just can't overcome it. I try and I try and I try. And that was the story over and over again until as a mother, I just longed to have her in a place where she could find freedom of that freedom in Jesus and not worry about what other people think so much. And so that prayer has been answered. She has found that over and over again in her community. All she has to do is tell them that she's struggling with something, and they will be right there praying with her and helping her through whatever she's going through. And that's so beautiful to me. And one thing I was going to say earlier was when I would be in spiritual discussions, Bible studies, Sunday schools in the Holdeman Church, I would get frustrated a lot because it seemed like a lot like the revival, the council meetings. What came out was so often the lack of depth, the talking about the things they just couldn't quite overcome, and it was the same thing over and over. And I just longed to have a conversation, a deep spiritual conversation with someone where truth was the main topic, and not how awful we were and how sinful we were. Not that we don't acknowledge that, but that I could have a conversation, and there were these gems that would show up, and I would just latch onto them like, oh, this one gets it, she knows Jesus, but so often it seemed like I would say something, I would share my Jesus, and people would just look, awe would just come in their faces like, wow, that's so profound. It's like, no, girls, this should be how all of us are talking. We should all feel that way. And I feel like I'm in a community now where I'm the little guy. I'm the one that's just sitting there just drinking in the truths that are being said. And it's deep, it's profound, it's beautiful. And I just would never want to go back to that shallow, superficial kind of conversations. It's just so meaningless to me. And now we go to Bible studies as a family, and wow, we pray together, we talk together, we eat together. And I just am so in awe of how filled I am when I leave. It's powerful.
Yes, I absolutely know what you're talking about. And it's something that they just don't understand. You know, my family, like my parents, I try to talk to them about it. And they, my dad just said, no, he says, our beliefs. And that as long as you know, are where you are, you're not a member of the one true church, that we will not speak the same spiritual language. And I just said, okay, well, I speak a very beautiful language with all of my other friends and their parents, so I'm okay with that.
Wow.
And you mentioned that verse about, and I sat down and I read that verse to my dad, and I said, how ironic is it that this verse about tearing mothers from daughters and fathers from sons and children from parents, that you think that that's the life you're living, but the truth of the matter is this is the life I am living. God, I have gone away. And I am in love with God, and I am in love with my relationship with God. And you are sitting here telling me that I cannot have that kind of relationship because I am not a member of your church. And I've had a very good relationship. My parents are very open, been able to talk about this stuff. And obviously they let me know, that they don't agree with me, but they love me anyways. And it's okay.
Wow, that's so awesome. With my parents, there was mostly the deepest conversations that we would have had was my mom sending me a song about heaven to let me know that she wanted me to be in heaven with her, and that, she was. And so I sent to her in response, I said, my theme song right now is In Christ Alone. It's just one of my favorite songs. And that was not exactly what she wanted to hear. But I will say this, my parents were quite distant with me for a while. And I just went down to Brazil to see them now in December. And so much healing had taken place. They accepted me with open arms. They did not put us at a different table. I do have two siblings that are expelled. So they're kind of outnumbered. But we were put at the same table with them. My parents have always faithfully held the avoidance all my life, they have been religious about that. And all of a sudden, they have let go of that. And I am so, so thankful that they let our relationship be more important than their religion. I just thank God over and over that we had such a good time together. And Pat's family also has been so good to us. I feel like we are just so blessed, because I know it's not that way for everybody. But one thing that we decided was that when we go be with them, that we're not going to go with a chip on our shoulder, looking over our shoulder, hoping they treat us right, wondering if they're going to treat us right. We are going to go there on the offensive. We are going to go there and show them love. We are going to love on them no matter what they think. We're going to love the negative right out of them. And it has worked. With Jesus's help, it has worked. They treat us like we're not expelled most of the time. They treat us like we are just loved. They love us, and they feel free to love us without restraint. And I am so thankful that God has let that happen in our lives, because I know it's not that way for everybody. And I'm truly sorry that it's not.
Yeah, there are some sad stories out there. I left so long ago that, I mean, I lived a whole life, and then I got married and had children. And, I think my family was so shocked at the kind of mother I was, that, it just, they got to see a whole side of me that they never thought was there. And so I think it blew that out of the water. But ever since well, I had a good relationship before, but ever since having children, like, it has completely changed. I mean, you wouldn't even know, like, there's no difference. There's no separation, anything like that. So yes, I'm very, and then when I married my husband, though, his family were very staunch. They sat us nigh right into death in the other room. And I was like, so not used to it. But you know what? They came around, and actually Greg Dick was here for meetings, and someone asked him to speak on the avoidance. And so he said, okay. And he said, have a song while I think about it. And then he got up and he said, he said, the truth of the matter is if you cannot do it in love, do not do it at all, because you are doing more harm than good if you try to hold the avoidance in anything but love. He said, and something as simple as if it's somebody's birthday and you're talking about what to do. He said, just say, let's go out to dinner. He says that is enough of a reminder. He said, and just go. Ever since that talk, my in-laws have been completely different. They sit us at the table with them. There is no difference whatsoever. And we have just embraced it and loved it and loved them and just continued on. I mean, we loved them before, but we just have continued on, and it has just deepened our relationship with them. And I've been so thankful.
That's so awesome. But I wanted to say this, that is so sad, though, that they had to have permission for that. It's just so sad that they had to have permission from a well-known preacher, but that they actually let go of decades of beliefs. I mean, something that they have done for so many years and believed for so many years, that they were actually able to let go. I really believe that all of this movement of so many leaving the Holdeman Church, I believe that is giving the evil forces less power.
Yes.
Yeah. That God wants us to love each other, and that somehow he's breaking down barriers to where love can happen instead of so much religion. This is what Jesus came to earth for. And it's happening again. I see it all over. And so I am so, so thankful that people are finding strength to stand for Jesus, to stand for truth, and free more and more people. I have a very dear friend who is waiting for her spouse to join her in believing that this is not the right thing. She's gone to the point of no return, and yet she's still living the life to be in unity with him. And so there's so many to pray for. That's one thing I pray for every time I pray. In the morning when I go and I pray, I say, God, please be with those that are standing for truth, that are standing for Jesus. Help them to have the strength because it's hard. I know, I've been there. It's so hard to do it, but if they can find the strength, they're going to make it, because Jesus is the one that makes the way, and he will help them through.
Exactly. And the relationship and the deepening, when you no longer have that, when you no longer have um, that point, that veil you have to go through. You no longer have that, the ministers or the church, but it's you and God, and you're able to, meet deep in that relationship and meet him where he wants you to be. Like, it is such a beautiful thing that happens. Children, you gotta love them. They don't always
Gotta.
listen to the don't come in.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but really honestly, and and this is your story, so it's not like I want to hijack it or anything, but the deepening relationship I had with God in increments as I left was absolutely amazing. And just,
Yeah,
it was as real to me as my conversion experience was. And there was no doubting them,
yeah,
and they were
right.
beautiful. And that is one thing I will say that I have absolutely loved, and to this day I love, is the laying on of hands. There is something so powerful in that, and
Yeah,
I enjoy it.
yes,
So
yes. I can't say enough either how worth it is. And that that mourning period fades away. That sharp pain, it fades away. And I fully believe that when we witness our Holdeman families are looking for love. They have never been loved unconditionally. And when we do, they sap it up. We we cannot minimize or make it seem small in our minds that what we can do for them yet, what we can do for them by just loving on them unconditionally, and not bringing up subjects that cause problems, not that we shouldn't discuss things, but that we just show them what Jesus' true love is like. That is so powerful. That is what's going to draw them more than anything else.
absolutely. And unfortunately, I'm still learning that lesson about not talking about things that kind of, you know I had but I overcame that. I With my mom, I realized that every time we got together, and normally we spend days together, like she'll come here or we'll go there, the girls and I and stuff. And so we'll spend anywhere from 4 to 14 days with each other. And I noticed that every time there was at least one time that we would get into an argument. It was always early morning over coffee, when we were having the greatest conversation. It would just go south in a bad way. Well, she came last time she came here. I vowed to myself we were not going to have that tough moment. We were not going to have it. I didn't care if I had to eat my tongue. We were not going to have that moment. So what do you know? The last morning they were here, I heard her up. I got up. I got my coffee. She had hers. We were sitting there and we were starting to have this heart to heart talk. Just this beautiful, just sharing. And all of a sudden, she clammed up and she turned directions, and something in my mind clicked. And I said, oh, this is when it happens. So stay calm, Amanda, because you're not going there. You made a promise to yourself. You're not doing this. So just observe. So I did. And I realized that when she felt like her religion was coming under attack, when she was about to gossip about somebody in a way that was going to make the church look bad, she caught herself. And every time she caught herself, I felt the change in direction and the inauthenticity happen. And that always triggered me. So this time I was able to watch it happen, understand what was happening, and I just went right along with it. We just flowed. I changed the subject to something else, and we had a beautiful talk that ended perfectly without any tears or accusations or anything. I was so proud of myself. But okay, now with that being said, now just 2 days ago I chewed my sister because I asked her why could she How could she stay in a religion that um harbored pedophiles and was okay with them hiding out in their midst, basically? And oh, I felt so bad. I did not go back and apologize to her. Although we left the conversation, I said, I love you. I have no problem with you. I don't mind. I don't have no problem
Right.
staying in the religion. I just maybe think you should be aware of some of this stuff and protect your children. Anyways, but still, sometimes I think my mouth needs to shut a little bit more often.
Oh, we all have our thing to work on, don't we?
So, in closing, is there anything else you would like to say?
I just appreciate what you guys are doing. I like the spirit of this podcast, and I like it a lot that you're giving people voices, and it's there to encourage others that are on the journey, that are, struggling with standing for what they believe. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it also. We appreciate all of our guests that come on that are willing to share their stories. We know that it can't be easy, and there's some fear involved sometimes with breaking that silence. But really, we released our first podcast, as you know, Sunday morning, and we have had such wonderful responses from it. Really, really good ones. So we're excited about this, and we love the fact that we are able uh to add to give a voice to people that have been silenced. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.